Welcome back! A couple weeks ago I released a pattern that showed how to make a very simple puppet. But a lot of people have been commenting on how to make a puppet kind of like Ivan. In this video I'm going to show you how to make the pattern for his head. To start off we need to create the shape of the head. And we're going to do that using clay. The type of clay I like to use is called Monster Clay. It's kind of like plasticine clay, but it doesn't have that oily feel to it. It comes in a whole bunch of different hardnesses, and if you're only going to be using it for pattern making, get the softest one that you can. The harder clay is more used for doing sculptures with a high level of detail. Again, not necessary for what we're doing. It helps to have some sort of a stand for your sculpture. I put this together real quick just using a piece of pipe with a flange and just a 3/4 inch piece of wood. This clay is much easier to work with when it's a little bit softer. I've seen people use a heat gun to soften it. The containers are oven safe too, so you can put it in the oven for a couple minutes. Some people even microwave it, but I heard that can kind of change the texture a little bit. But my favorite method is just to use a cheese grater. This creates little shavings of clay that make it much more easier to use. You want to start off by building up a mass of clay. It's a little bit too round for what I'm looking for. I want to make the head a little bit longer. Anytime you're doing a sculpture, you want to make sure you're always turning the entire piece. Okay, now that I have a rough basic shape, I want to decide where the mouth is going to be. So let me kind of draw a line about where I think I want it. Try to make it as straight as I can. About like that. And I'll use these wire cutters to cut into it further. I'll cut out the bottom part of the mouth. So now it should come out like a watermelon slice. So if you're following along at home, you can decide how big or how small you want this mouth to be, or how high or how low, whatever you want. Okay, I'm liking how it's coming out, but I think I want to give it a little less of a chin. So I'm going to scrape away some of that clay. Once you're pretty happy with the sculpture, you want to smooth it out the best you can, but it does not have to be perfect. Okay, so now we have our quick basic sculpture, nothing fancy at all, and it's not even on both sides if you do notice. That actually doesn't matter, because I'm gonna pick the side that I like the most, and then we're just gonna make a pattern of one side, and then we're just gonna mirror that for the other side of the puppet. So the next step is using masking tape. And what you're gonna wanna do is rip off little tiny pieces of the masking tape, and you're just going to kind of almost decoupage it on. You wanna make sure that you are overlapping these pieces, and you cover the entire half of the head. The reason why you want to use small pieces is so you don't get wrinkles. You do get little wrinkles, it's not a big deal, but you do want to avoid them. Now as you're covering this, you want to make sure you have about 2 or 3 layers of tape across the entire surface. Alright, so now I've covered half of this sculpture. Now let's make the center line. Decide where about the middle is. I'll say right about there. And then I'll do it under the chin too. Continue down to about there. Let me trim that. The X-Acto blade. So now it's in half exactly how I want it. The next step is to draw some darts. Now this is a common question I get. Where to draw those lines? The more often you use this technique, the easier it'll be to find out where those lines need to go. It also depends on how detailed you want this to be. For a pattern like this, I like to keep it pretty simple. So I'm going to put a dart coming right from the top of the head down about there, kind of like that, and I'll put one under the chin over here, and I'll put one right about there. And now that we have those lines, let's cut those with the X-Acto blade as well. Now that we've cut on those lines, let's carefully peel this off without hurting the sculpture. And there's our pattern. Now that we have our tape pattern, let's transfer it to a piece of paper. Now I'm going to take this tape pattern and stick it as flat as I can to the paper. I think I'm actually not going to end up using that dart, but we'll see. Now what I'm going to do is trace this with my pen. Now that I have this pattern, I'm going to smooth it out a little bit by hand. Once I laid this flat, I realized this dart wasn't really doing much, so I took it out. Now we've traced our pattern, but it's too small, so I have to decide how large I want to blow it up to. Now I think I want it a little bit smaller than Ivan's head here, so let me start off by measuring that. Head's about, with an open mouth, 10 inches, which is a huge head, a little too big. I think I want this head to be, it's a little bit more round, maybe about, I'm thinking about 7 inches tall. And this clay head right now is 4 inches. So we just have to do a little bit of math. So 7 times 100 divided by 4, and that's x is equal to 175%. Boom. So now I know I have to blow this up to 175%. Let's go do it. Okay, here it is. I'm about to put it into the printer at 175%. Now, put it in just like that. Button. You can see the size. Now let's go back to the shop. So now we have our pattern blown up to a bigger size, but now I think I wanted to make a little change. So my goal in this video was to make a very easy generic puppet pattern. So I decided to make it a little bit more simple. I actually want to get rid of this dart, so I'll show you how to do that. Start off by cutting out the pattern. I'm going to cut straight up from that dart to cut this into a separate piece. So now I'll just kind of slowly push it in like that. Now that's a little closer to what I'm looking for. Use some spray adhesive and glue it down to the craft paper. For a puppet this size, I like to use 1/2 inch foam. You can use the green foam from craft stores, but this is my favorite. This is reticulated foam, also known as dry fast foam. I ordered this from foamonline.com. I order a rectangle with a 1/2 inch width and a 24 inch length and height. That creates a nice sheet. So now let's trace out this pattern. Try to get as close to the edges as you can to save the foam. To cut it out, a lot of people like to use a razor, but since this foam is only 1/2 inch wide, scissors work fine. I'm going to put this together with the contact cement. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area when doing this. And it's always a good idea to have gloves on. You don't need to put glue inside this area where the mouth is, or inside where the neck hole is. The glue only goes on this edge, these edges, and the inside dart. Alright, it's pretty tacky. Now let's attach this together. So here we have our puppet head assembled. Now one thing I am noticing is in blowing up the proportions, the neck hole is too small, so I'm just going to make that a little bit larger and then transfer that to my pattern. There we have it, a nice little puppet head. Next, let's make the mouth plate. To find the size of the mouth plate, I'll slide this paper into the mouth of my puppet and then just trace it. And there I have a mouth. One thing I want to do is make sure it's symmetrical though, so I'll line up these edges to find the center. Now I want to trace this pattern twice to create the fabric mouth plate. mouth plate itself, I want to trim off about 1/2 inch. Now we have our fabric mouth pattern and our mouth plate pattern. On the mouth plate for a pattern this size, I like to use the plastic from a storage container. There it is. Next, I like to sand the edges a little bit so that the glue sticks better. Now there's a couple different ways people like to put the mouth plate in. Some people put it in straight against the edge like this at a 90-degree angle. What I actually like to do is to fold it around. So I actually put the mouth inside, on the inside edge like this, and then curl it around, just like that, to the inside. That gives you a little bit more surface area inside the mouth. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom. It's kind of an awkward thing to do. And there we have a simple puppet head and pattern made from scratch. Now this new head pattern is available on my website, but I do encourage you to try to make your own pattern. This was an example of pattern making with a very simple form. If you have more details in your sculpture, you're going to have to make a lot more pieces and darts in your pattern. And there are also a bunch of other ways to do this. I've seen people use tinfoil, duct tape, and even liquid latex. And the best method is the one that you're most comfortable with. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to make the fabric covering. I also have plans to make a body video for this guy too. People have been asking me for years to make a body pattern to my original video, but since it's been so long, I decided to make a fresh new head pattern. Don't worry, this one's actually coming. Might even already be filmed. See you next time.